Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Business Aspirin. I'm your host, Clint Junell. This is a podcast where we talk about pains in business, and we try to resolve them with our guests and have conversations about nuggets of information that makes your life better. And today, I have with me Dan Atchison from 911 Restoration out of Willamette Valley. Dan, how are you today?
Doing well. It's a rainy Oregon day, which is pretty normal for us. Not normal this time of year, but I'm not complaining. It's 58 degrees. It feels nice.
Hey, 58 would be so great right now. Oh, and I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And when it gets to be summer around this time of year, now we've been pretty fortunate this year, but it gets to be about this time of the year, and then suddenly we're at 110, whatever the case may be. It feels like, hell is what it feels like. And the reality is, like, you wake up in the morning, you get out of bed, you walk outside at 6 a.m. It's 94 degrees. My son played hockey, and we would leave the rink a lot of the times at 10 p.m., leaving the rink after practice, and it would be 97 degrees still at 10 p.m. So there's just no reprieve from the heat, and then everybody's irritable.
Totally get it. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and it's you wake up at 7 in the morning. It's already 95 degrees, about 85%, humidity. And I often wear glasses, and, you open the front door and the glasses just fog up.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why I live in Oregon now, because I don't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, a lot of our listeners would be very jealous of the fact that you're enjoying 58-degree weather right now, while some of us are smeltering in, summer heat. Well, let's talk a little bit about Dan. Who is Dan? How did you get in the restoration space? And let's just kind of navigate those questions.
Yeah. So like I was saying before, grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, back in 2012. And really the way that I found out about restoration was two incidents really when I was a student at Bama. So at one point, me and a bunch of my friends, we were getting ready to go down to Destin, Florida, go to the beach for a week. Loaded all our stuff in the car. We're getting ready to leave. And then one of my friends is like, hey, want to run back inside, use the restroom real quick. So he does, runs inside, comes back out. We get in the car, drive off. We come back a week later, and our entire kitchen ceiling had collapsed because he had used the upstairs bathroom and it had overflowed for a whole week. And yeah, so the ceiling gave out, completely fell down in there. The green guys, the very famous restoration company, showed up. And I saw that the bill for just the cleanup was $28,000. And I was like, damn, that's good business. And then about a year later, April 27th, 2011, we had the big super outbreak of tornadoes all across the United States. And Tuscaloosa took one just like right up the gut. It missed my house by about a block. And it was terrifying. But, again, you see some major storm like that firsthand. And you want to get the community back together. And so those things kind of stuck in the back of my mind. My dad was he was a general contractor when I was growing up. So I've been around the industry. I'm not particularly handy myself. Like, I'm terrible at repairs, but that's why I do mitigation. I don't do rebuilds. So, I can cut in a straight line and I can suck water. And that's, really what I try to focus on. Didn't really get into restoration until many years later. So I had, got out of Bama, went up to DC for a couple of years, eventually moved out to California, and that's where I got hooked up with 911 Restoration. I've been on the corporate team since about 2015, so it's been about 10 years. In 2017, I moved up and started selling our franchises on the national level. Back then, we had like maybe 35 locations. Where we are today is closer to 140, so we've grown quite a bit over that time period. And then a year ago, I sold myself a franchise. So I opened up the location here in southern Willamette Valley in Eugene, Oregon, which I guess, go Ducks, or I should say Skoducks, right? Yeah, I've adopted the Ducks. And I feel okay with that because Alabama and Oregon have never played each other, which is shocking to me.
Ever? Really? That is interesting. So it's both are really pretty good football teams. So it is interesting.
Incredibly unusual.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, so you had some experiences. You kind of experienced what people felt like on the restoration side post-catastrophe as the recipient of the catastrophe, and just made a middle note about that. Then you ran off and you were gone to DC and California. What was happening during that time period? What were you doing in the interim?
Political fundraising.
Political fundraising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
What a night.
realized real quick that I hated that.
Yeah, sure. What a nightmare, right? Like,
Yeah.
awesome.
I'd originally, I wanted to do the work in the foreign service. And then, yeah, I found my way into fundraising. I've always had a sales background. And then, it's just funny little things like that, how things shift. And then I was actually, I was walking to work in DC, and we had a late March like blizzard that had blown through. So we'd had like 2 weeks of spring and then just like blizzard out of nowhere. And as I was walking to work, I slipped and like fell down some steps and like busted my head. And I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm moving to California.
Yeah. That's all it took.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Literal,
then,
it took me getting boxed on the head, but decided to move to a better climate.
okay. So then you went to California and immediately made the hookup with 911?
No, I actually did work for doing charity fundraising out there for a group called Children's International that does, they help get kids in underprivileged countries to school and access to healthcare and things like that. Met my wife through that job, and then saw a posting for 911 restoration, and it all just suddenly clicked. And I was like, oh yeah, like this whole thing I forgot about like 7-8 years ago. And yeah, and then I haven't looked back since. Restoration's it's a fantastic business. And I've always felt that it's a business nobody thinks about until it happens to them, right? And that's
Absolutely.
always one of the most important things when you're building in the restoration space is, how do you stay top of mind, and how do you sell to somebody who doesn't have a disaster yet, right? Because branding and awareness of your business is a lot more important in this industry than a lot of other ones, just because it is emergency.
You know, my contention has always been, if I could deliver a radio commercial to you on your way home every day, right when you walked into the door that was flooding, or your alarm clock goes off and it's the radio station and it's my commercial playing right before you step out of your bed into a puddle of water, that would be ideal, because literally we don't know when this is going to happen. So it's crazy. A pretty unique story about how you got into restoration. And like, I find that kind of interesting from a lot of perspectives. Not only though that you went into initially not doing restoration, but working on the corporate side to help sell franchises, because you had a background in sales essentially on the fundraising side.
All fundraising is selling ideas, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you sold ideas of how restoration was a good market and good opportunity, and then somehow convinced yourself along that path that you needed to do that. So then you bought your own franchise location from yourself. Did you give yourself a good deal?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. It was a sweetheart deal. I would assume it was
I got two territories for the price of one. So
there you go. Nice.
It still had to pay a little bit.
I think that's fair, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you're the one in control of all that, I should at least be able to give myself a deal if I'm going to go ahead and take one of these locations.
I working on the franchise sales side of it. I mean, I've sold 100+ locations at this point, and selfishly, I've made a lot of people very rich. And I was like, why aren't I rich?
Yeah,
sure.
Sure.
And I will say this: I'm still doing franchise sales and trying to manage the time constraints of having a 24/7 emergency service business while also working people through the sales process. I'm fortunate that I have other salespeople on my team as well, but it's also given me a lot of, like, I have a lot of nuggets now that, it's that, what do you wish or before you bought the business, right? And so it's been very, very helpful in that regard. And we have a really great team here in Oregon. I have a fantastic business partner, a guy named Shane, who I didn't know before. So he actually had inquired about opening his own franchise. He used to manage a restoration company in Florida. And his background is really like the estimating and bookkeeping side of the business. And I'm more on the sales side. So he had requested, looking at a territory in Bend, Oregon, other side of the Cascades from where I'm at. And so he was going to come out and visit. And I was like, hey, you should come over and check out Eugene, because all the rain falls on this side of the mountain, And so it kind of pitched like, hey, your skill set is the exact opposite of my skill set. And I think we could work that very well together. And so we have a pretty good yin and yang, where I'm the person who keeps the homeowner happy, and I'm the good cop, and he's the bad cop who bashes insurance adjusters over the head. And he's actually calling me right now. Sorry.
But we can have this conversation on the podcast if you'd like, and you could just chat with him.
Well, if I get like a dispatch for a job, I will put that on. because that's
Yeah, that's fun.
always worthwhile,
That's fun. Absolutely. Well, I find it intriguing that you believed. It says to me, it says a lot about 911 restoration. That you said, okay, I'm doing this, and I like what we have as a product enough to buy in and do my own location. So let's talk a little bit about free reign to pitch 911.
Yeah. Well, I truly think we have a really unique company. A lot of restoration companies, and especially when you look at the franchises in general, we all use the same equipment, we all use the same software, and in many cases the only thing that sets us apart is what color the truck is, right? And so how do you differentiate yourself in a space where everyone is the same, right? I think 911 has a very unique approach to that with creating a solid customer experience. And most of our competitors, they'll advertise to steal the line. It's like it never even happened, right? But for us, that's just really table stakes, right? What a homeowner really wants, they don't care how the work gets done. They care that they're communicated with very well. And that's really the promise that we make. It's the great communication part. In fact, the front of our vans say communication as good as our restoration, which is kind of a little bit of a bold promise, right?
Here it is.
But that's really what sets our brand apart, is focusing on that customer experience and really showing empathy for what is a traumatic situation that a homeowner is going through. It's part of the reason that Forbes named us the #1 restoration company for 2024 was that empathetic approach.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that sets us apart. We're also still a family-owned business, so it's not a nameless, faceless conglomerate. We're not publicly traded, and our goal isn't to be a 3,000 unit franchise. We don't want to be served. We want to have about 400 locations, kind of what we're going towards. And, exclusive territories, give everybody room to grow and develop. And then, at that point, when we get closer to that 400 number, that's where we want to start looking at like other verticals that can tie in to the restoration services. So I've talked about roofing, plumbing, emergency plumbing in particular with restorations, a solid hand-in-hand fit. And yeah, that's kind of where we're going right now. We just started expanding into Canada as well. So we now have 5 locations open in Canada. And yeah, that's kind of a big push for this year, is to get a couple of those other major Canadian markets open as well.
Does 911 exist in Canada? Do they do the same thing?
Yeah, they do. So
okay,
they are 911, and we've talked about what happens when we expand to the UK and have to change it to 999 restoration.
Is that what they use?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I just wondered. I'm like, that's an interesting concept to think about. Okay. So, you've said a couple of unique things. One of the things that you said we would normally get to later, but you were like, some of the what do I wish I had known before I got started. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you kind of brought that up a little bit a minute ago. What are the things you wish you had known before you started?
Buy a dump trailer immediately. Just buy a dump trailer immediately. That's because we always have like our starter equipment package and stuff like that. Any franchise, they'll say, hey, you need 20 to 25 air movers, you need 6 to 8 dehumidifiers. At this point, I tell everybody, and a dump trailer. Like, just add that into your equipment package. You're going to need it. The first month that I was open, I rented one from Home Depot 6 times, and I was like, okay, I just need to buy one of these things. And you should know this, being in restoration, it's one of the fastest items that pays for itself, because every single job you show up at with a tandem axle dump trailer, it's a $400 Xactimate charge. And I have like a 8x12 dump trailer. You can fit, 2 or 3 projects, 2 or 3 small jobs worth of debris in that. And so you're looking at $1,200 to $1,600 that you charge, and then your fee for dumping, it's $50. So I think the dump trailer paid for itself in like a month and a half,
Great, right? From that perspective, for
I
sure.
apologize that my phone has just been ringing off the.
No, you're fine. We can certainly navigate around that.
Sorry, I'm gonna put it on silent now.
It's part of the process of running a business. And so honestly, like, the goal of this whole podcast is for people to see what running a business is like and understand the pain points and navigate through that stuff. So it's like, okay, this is real life. My phone's got to go. It's got to ring. And hopefully sometimes I got to answer it. And I may have to answer it in the middle of a podcast, because if there's work calling that needs something.
Some calls, they're going to charge you $450 if you don't answer it.
That's right. That's right. And that's interesting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about navigating your transition from corporate sales into operational of a restoration company? Because clearly there's some things you understood about the space, but what were the challenges you faced transitioning into actually the operational side of running your own business?
Far and away, the biggest challenge is time management, right? And a lot of people, when they're looking at a franchise, they're like, oh, can I do this like on a semi-absentee basis? Yes, question mark, like maybe. The fact is, restorations, it's an incredibly demanding business. And yes, it's 24/7. Now, I will say, despite it being 24/7, it's very rare to actually get that middle of the night phone call. I know in the past year that we've been open, I've done 3 jobs in the middle of the night. Most of the time, if the homeowner wakes up and they're all sleepy eyed and they see a puddle in the room and they think to themselves like, oh, that can wait till tomorrow, they'll let it wait till tomorrow. They'll call you at, 5:30 or 6 in the morning, but they will wait until tomorrow. However, those middle of the night ones are the ones you absolutely do not want to miss. The good news, or at least with us, like our franchise, is I don't have to take those phone calls. I have a 24/7 call center that does that for me. And of course, they then call me afterwards if it is in fact an emergency. But, managing your time, or when you're transitioning into becoming a business owner, I've seen a lot of people do it wrong by trying to wear all of the hats, right? Like, I'm going to do the estimating, I'm going to do the project management, I'm going to do the local sales. And what that really means is you're going to do all of those things very badly. You really need to focus on what are you good at, stick to that, and hire for what you're not good at. And then think, as a business owner, where can I spend my time in the most effective manner? Obviously, I love sales and I wish that I could be out pounding the pavement every day to build new relationships for my business and my local market. But the reality is I still have a day job, right? And, even if I were doing that, it's something that you should even have a dedicated salesperson for, that they only do that, because there's enough other stuff going on in the business that I would not be able to do it effectively. So for me, it's go to the Chamber of Commerce events. They have like a Greeters Tuesday morning breakfast every week. Go to that. It's a really great networking opportunity. I'm a part of a BNI group. BNI has been incredibly effective for me as a first year business owner. And BNI is a mixed bag. Like, it really depends on what kind of group you join, but it is a seat specific networking group. So I'm a part of a group here. I'm the only restoration company in that group. But within that group, I have all kinds of potential referral partners. You have, property and casualty insurance, commercial insurance, real estate agents, plumber, electrician, roofer, flooring guy, fencing and deck guy. And so there's a lot of natural business that gets passed between everybody in that group. And, it's a once a week, hour and a half commitment. And in like 6 months, we've closed like 70,000 in business out of just going to that group, So finding how to spend your time the most effectively is the most important thing.
Sure. And that's tough, right? And I can attest to that full well, especially what you said early on and all of that. Because as we started on our end, on the restoration side, it was definitively, I was doing everything, writing estimates, running the operational side, doing the bookkeeping, doing the sales, trying to just keep it all afloat. And then when I began to hire people, I hired someone to do the same thing, do the operational on their project, do the estimating on their project, do the sales, and just kind of, and then because the way I'm wired, and most entrepreneurs probably are, that start as entrepreneurs, rail against corporate rules and policies, right? Yeah. Like, we don't, like, most of us that are entrepreneurs don't want to follow the rules unless there are rules that we create. But I began to see the reality of, understand now why some of these things are placed. I understand why they divide these things up. I understand why there's an HR department and an accounting department and a sales department. And like, it began to make more sense the way we got into it. And we were fortunate enough to be able to be relatively successful doing it the way we were, but we had to start compartmentalizing some of those things to make it make more sense and to be able to kind of scale it. Because there's no way to scale it in any capacity if you've got to touch everything. And the next person you hire has to touch everything. And then stuff just starts to slip through the cracks. And that's how we wound up with a software company, is trying to manage all those things that were going on and understand how to put it together and make sense out of it and communicate to the customers. All those things were just way too difficult to navigate that way. And so it became, an interesting experiment for me to learn how to go about doing some of that. So I appreciate you saying that specifically in your transition. You talked about customer experience being one of the top priorities for 911 restoration and kind of your differentiator. How do you go about the customer experience? What are you looking for? How do you take care of customers? Because I think it's important that others understand especially guys like in the service industry, typically are technicians that want to jump into the service. They're really good at fixing an AC. They're really good at plumbing. They're really good at restoration. And in some cases, they're great at this initial conversation with the customer, but are they good at the overall customer experience? And sometimes that's where they lack. And I think they need to understand the importance of that. So tell us the importance of that from your
So
perspective.
the way that we really do this in our business, and the thing is, when I say it, it's going to sound like something that like, oh yeah, like duh, right? But so many contractors don't do it. Like there's always the running joke of you're on contractor time. If I say I'm going to be there at 10, it really means if I'm a contractor that I'm going to be there between 10 and 2 p.m. Right. And I'm not going to tell the homeowner like where I'm at or what I'm doing or what's going on. And really it all boils down to just clear communication. Right. When we have calls that come in, if I say I'm going to be there at 11, we're going to be there at 11. Odds are we're going to be there maybe 5 to 10 minutes early. And it's those little things go so far because the restoration industry as a whole has a reputation of, let's say a person has a kitchen fire. It's their house. It's their belongings. It is a traumatic experience for them. And the way that restoration works, you got to make the problem worse before it gets better, right? Because you're going to start pulling out pieces of wall and ripping up flooring and tearing out cabinets. And so if you haven't told the customer like what you're going to do, a lot of times they will suddenly freak out that like, oh my God, like you've ripped out half of my house. And so many of those little points of friction can be cleared up just by saying like, hey, first of all, always lead with, I'm sorry that this happened to you. Nobody in our business says that for the most part. And taking just a second to express a little bit of empathy really goes a long way with a homeowner who's dealing with a traumatic incident in their home. And then just telling them like, hey, here's my plan. Here's what I'm going to do. They don't care how it gets done, but they do want to know what you are going to do, right? Like you don't have to explain how your equipment works. You just say, hey, this is the general plan for how we're going to accomplish what needs to be done. At the end of the day, I'm always texting like all active customers, hey, here's the project update. Here's everything we did today. Line it all out. And really, it's all about just having a lot of touch points with those homeowners. And then what do you know? That leads to you having great reviews. Right? And I know saying it sounds obvious, but so many people just don't do it.
No, absolutely they don't. And in a lot of cases, it'll fall back up to the customers. They just, even on the sales side of things, like they just expect it to be a thing. And if it's not instantly a project, they don't do any follow-up. They don't communicate well. And that's part of the reason too, we did what we did in our tools is that we go, the majority of your clients have never had this experience. They've never had a fire or a major water loss that's caused any damage to their property. And so this is the first time they've been down this path. And when you look at an environment where my biggest investment, the place that I'm supposed to feel safe, is now in shambles, and I've hired this group to come in and do something, and I don't know where it's at. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what their plan is. I don't know when they're going to do it. Then that's how things kind of get spun out of control. And the number of times before we really had systems operating the way we really needed them to, that I'd have conversations with my reconstruction manager, for instance. And it's like, listen, if you'll do an update, it'll take you 20 seconds to do an update about what is happening. As long as you're clear about that update and what the next step is and when that step is going to take place, then that's going to save you a ton of headaches because they're going to get notified.
Well, the problems suddenly get smoothed over.
That's like, right.
Okay.
95% of our problems was a communication issue. And so if you don't do that, then suddenly now you have to drive across the DFW Metroplex for 45 minutes or an hour to have an hour-long meeting with someone and drive back. You spent 3 hours of your day that you didn't have to. You could have solved with a 20-second update in the system. And when people finally buy into that, they go, man, I see exactly what you're saying, because communication is so vital in an environment, especially where I can't stay in my house. I don't see somebody there every day. Why aren't they there every day? You said the carpet was going to be installed the middle of the week, and it's now, Wednesday morning and nobody's there. What's going on? And communication and clear communication and accurate communication is vital. And so I certainly appreciate you saying that.
We lean into that pretty heavily with the commercials that 911 makes, because it's, we try to go with the anti-sell of, like, I'm trying to think of the exact language they use because I just had a brain fart and forgot what I was talking about for a second. But we lean into that with all of our marketing material of like, We hope we never work with you, because obviously we wouldn't wish disaster on anyone. But if it does happen, we're going to take care of you and communicate clearly the whole time. Honestly goes a really long way with customers, and it saves you so many headaches. And so it's, just like get it through your head that a 20-second text message is a lot easier than like exactly what you said, a 3-hour drive across town apologizing over and over about a miscommunication. And I don't get it right every time. I still make mistakes too, but we do make it a point to limit those mistakes as much as possible.
Yeah. Two things about that. And here's what I'm going to tell you about the restoration space, and what I tell my team all the time and everybody that I have conversations with is the reality is our entire industry exists because things didn't go the way they were supposed to. If everything always went the way it was supposed to, we would not be having this conversation, because there would be no restoration industry. So I'm also human, and occasionally I'm going to make mistakes. It's how I own that mistake and how I fix that mistake that makes the difference between doing it well and being a shitty person, honestly. That's what it amounts to. So, I'm with you on that. And I think it's important that people understand that when you're communicating, to be clear in what you're actually saying to them. Don't just communicate, be clear in the communication, because people appreciate the reality of, I can communicate to them, hey, carpet's going to be replaced, and if I tell them the day it's going to be replaced, I may be in trouble because I said it's going to be replaced on Tuesday and it really didn't replace till Wednesday. But if I said to them, carpet's going to be done before the end of the week, then it gets done on Wednesday. It's still done at the same time. And I'm in a better position with my customer because I communicated clearly with them in generalizations, right? But what they expected to happen happened. And so it's important when you start dealing with, I'm not in my house. And again, people don't have this experience. So communicating that with them is great. I think one of the things we talked about before we started recording, that communication is a commercial for you to make, right? Like, hey, I hope, that's a social media one right for you up front. In fact, I may do one of those myself. And that same thing is like, hey, we're the guy that you hope you never need. And we hope you never have to have us in your home. But in the event that you do, know that we're here because that's what we do. And we're capable of handling this. And so there's a post for you, Dan. Go make that post when we're done. Go make that post when we're done recording this, and you can jump all over it. What are some things, like we talked about some things you wish you knew, but what are some things that have occurred that you didn't expect? Like, what are some surprises you were like, interesting? And now you start to share that with people you sell a franchise to.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, when they're thinking about like the restoration industry, they get wrapped up in the profitability. And it's true. You can make a lot of money in restoration. And I think that's what causes communication problems later, because there are a lot of people in this industry who are just like hyper focused on how do we maximize profits. But like when we're talking about pretty much always having like 68, 70% profit margin on anything you do, like the money's always there. And, I think a lot of our competitors, that's why they don't communicate well, is they're only focused on that bottom line and not actually updating the customer. In terms of, I guess, things you should understand, and I used to talk about this less until I owned the business, is like how dirty of a job restoration is, because a lot of people think like water damage, and it's like, oh yeah, like little kitchen sink leak, whatever. It's like, no, that's like sewage backups, like sewage backups. One thing, we offer that not every 911 does. I'd say like maybe 10%, but we do crime scenes as well. And if you want to talk about the importance of good communication, especially when you're dealing with a very sensitive subject like that, it should take of paramount importance. But yeah, you see some crazy stuff, I mean, even like the first month that I opened, we had a little job for a crawl space. There was a cast iron sewage pipe had rusted out, sewage in the crawl space. We go in there and, first I'm taking a look around and I just see like a little puddle in a corner and I'm like, oh, this is nothing, $3,000, $4,000, like pretty easy. And then I realized once we actually crawled in there a bit further that the vapor barrier was up about 3 inches off the actual ground, because all of the sewage was under the vapor barrier. And so all of a sudden that became a much, much larger job. And this was like the very first month that I was open. So I had no idea how to handle that. And so I of course I put on a brave face with the homeowner and I was like, don't worry. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to take care of you. And just excuse me, I'm going to go step out to my van real quick. And I just start like panic dialing my franchise coach. And so I threw him on FaceTime and like did a walkthrough, and he walked me through it every step of the way, told me exactly how to handle it. And that wound up being a $48,000 job. So, it's know that you have people you can turn to for advice, and having good support is essential, especially if you've never done this kind of business before.
Sure. Okay. One of the things I want to address right there, because you made a statement, and I don't want everybody to be like, oh, I'm going to get into restoration. I'm going to get a 911 franchise. And in my first month, I'm going to do one project that's going to make me $48,000.
That is
right?
just my experience.
That's what happens, right? Like people, they hit a home run on one. They're like, oh crap, this is great. And they think that's going to be every week of their life.
No.
And they start going, oh, well, then they go buy the new truck, right? The big lifted truck, and everything looks good. And they start spending money on things they really can't afford. They should have reinvested. And I think from an entrepreneur perspective on this podcast, on the Business Aspirin side, is every business, regardless of what you're doing, has cycles. Look at the retail industry of the world, right? They even have cycles. That's why they have Black Friday sales, is because they know, okay, this time of the year is going to be great for us. The home moving movers, they have cyclical times. Like in the summer, this is a busy time for them because people are relocating after school's out and whatever's taking place. So don't think because you landed in something, and congratulations on your end, right? That's great. It may happen, and somebody may get a 911 franchise from you, and they may wind up in a position where their neighbor's house catches on fire and they have a $300,000 fire just like that.
No.
But that's not
Every day
normative,
Mm-mm.
right? It's not the reality of where we're at. So you have to be cautious and careful about some of those things.
Well, and it's good you bring that up, because this is something I do talk to people about when we're going through the sales process. And they always ask, what's the biggest reason that franchises fail? And, I think like franchises as a whole, it's like 83% success rate, right? I know within 911, it's like 88, 89%, something like that. Far and away, the biggest reason I've seen our franchises fail is because they bought a boat. And buying a boat is my metaphor for, you take somebody who suddenly is living high and doing a ton of good jobs, and then they start making frivolous purchases and buying a boat, which is really just a money pit. And then all of a sudden they can't pay their bills, a year later, right? And it's managing your money and managing the up and down times is very important. Like even talking about my own business right now, I have like $320,000 out in collections that I haven't gotten paid on, right? And I'm waiting on those checks to come in, and I'm having to float a lot of other expenses. Now, some of that is related to the wildfires in California. Like we sent a crew down to California to go do smoke cleanup down there. And whenever you have hurricane, wildfire, big catastrophe, those just take a long time to get paid anyway. But it's a part of this industry, like especially my side where I don't do reconstruction, I don't get any money up front. My average days to collect is usually about 40 days, but there's going to be some that are 90 or even 120, and it's a very important thing to understand about the business. I mean, even that win in my first month, I didn't really see that check until my fourth month, right?
Correct. Yeah. And cash flow is so important when you're trying to operate a business and make sure things are successful and be smart about what you're doing. I know you have a real job too, and you're running a restoration company, but in terms of where this puts you in work-life balance as an entrepreneur, what is your take on what owning and operating your own service industry company does for work-life balance?
So it hasn't been terrible for me because I have a partner. If I was doing this myself, it would be a whole lot harder. And obviously, partnerships aren't for everyone. I'm not advocating that everybody should have one, but it made sense in my situation, right? Because partnerships can also go really, really bad, right? For work-life balance, I mean, obviously, I still have my day job, but I still get called out to do things, in the middle of the night or late on a Friday or on the 4th of July, even. There's always that chance that a call will come in. And if all of my other crews are out, that means I'm dropping whatever I'm doing, I'm going, with the business itself is very demanding. In a joking way, I don't think I would be able to have a corporate job, the business, and children. I don't have children right now. I feel like that's probably helping on the work-life balance side. But the managing your time is going to be difficult no matter what, but it can be done because there's always something to be said of like failure not being an option. I feel like a lot of times when you're put into a position where you have to succeed, it gives you a lot of willpower to do so. And, starting a business, be it a franchise or independent, it's really expensive, right? And it's a huge investment. It's as much as a house, right? And failure not being an option can push you to do great things.
Well, and I say this all the time, like multiple times on the podcast, I have repeated, if there's an easy out and an easy way to quit, it's really easy to quit. Well, I'm just going to go back to my regular job because this is hard. So do not jump into any entrepreneurship opportunity, franchise or otherwise, if you're not committed to making it happen. If you just think I like what I do, that's not enough reason to start your own business of that. Maybe if you don't like where you're at, find another company you can work for doing still what you do. Because the reality is you'll eventually wind up not doing the part that you thought you loved and were good at if you're going to be successful, because you can't. I don't sling fans anymore. Like occasionally I go out because I want to be out there doing those things and help. And most of the time they want to go, can you leave? Like, we don't want you here. Which is fair. I get that, right? But you don't, long term, you're not going to be doing the thing that you enjoyed that made you want to own your own business in that industry, whether it's automotive repair or HVAC or restoration or carpet cleaner or whatever it is. The business side of it is going to make you have to operate a business. You have to work on the business and not in the business eventually.
You didn't buy a job, right?
So super crazy. Man, I appreciate that statement for sure. What is the challenge that you're facing that you're trying to navigate?
Well, I just told you I got a bunch of money out in collections. The good news is, I mean, most of that is actually getting paid out right now. It's, again, part of the business. We've had some employee growing pains, but it's because I kind of knew I was going to lose a couple of guys this summer because I hired some, they're wildland firefighters, great employees, but I can't compete with the wildland fire pay. I'm hoping they come back in the fall. We're kind of at that point now. I still run the business from my house, right? Like my garage is my business for the time being. We're at that point where we're like, is it time to make that jump to a warehouse space? Because we want to get into doing content. We already do it to a degree, but we'll pack it out to, a mini storage or something like that. But I want to be able to actually store it on site. And so that's kind of the transition we're trying to make right now. When we do get paid out on some of those jobs, it's second van in a warehouse. I think the level of business is where it's at that it can support that. But I'm also going to give it about 2 more months before we actually make the decision to do it, because just because you think it's right today doesn't mean it's going to be 2 months from now. Right.
Sure. Yeah. I would suggest in that environment that you start looking for locations and ideal locations and rates.
That's what I have. I have a file saved on my computer with a couple properties in it. So
yeah. And some of those may still be there when you're ready and some of them may not. But it still presents you the opportunity to know, okay, where do I want to be? Okay, if I go to this location, there's, 4 or 5 opportunities in this one industrial part for me to take. What's my access to the places I serve? How hard is it to cross the street? Like literally, we're in an environment now where when we got to the location that we operate out of, it was pretty benign. They've created another massive toll road that connects. We're in a little interconnector between 2 big toll roads and an interstate, and the market has the Dallas-Fort Worth market is always just exploding, right? So the number of the traffic here now in front of our office is ridiculous. So literally we have to now go out a back gate and go down and over to a light to be able to cross the street. Otherwise it's too sketchy. Like the risk reward of trying to get across the street is
make that jump.
So paying attention to those things. What's drive time traffic like? If I have to respond in the middle of the night, how hard is it to get to that location?
Well, that's everything for us is proximity to I-5, because it's just the vein that runs up the middle of the territories.
Yeah, perfect.
We do cover a pretty large area, geographically speaking, but the population is fairly centered. Within 45 minutes, I've gotten about 600,000 people. But my actual territory goes all the way to the Oregon coast, and certain communities on the coast, it would take 2.5 hours to get there,
Yeah. How far are you from from Mount Hood?
From Mount Hood, about 2 hours. So I'm 2 hours south of Portland and 2 hours north of Medford for the most part.
Yeah. The only reason I asked you, I got a buddy that's about to run Hood to Coast, which I guess is a big run out there. So he's coming up. I think it's in August or whatever. So It may or may not do support for him.
Well, watch out, because if you've never visited Oregon before, you may wind up like me, which is I visited one time and I was like, wow, I'm never going to leave. It's
Yeah,
nice.
I've got too many things to go on to not be where I am. I do not necessarily want to be in DFW. Don't get me wrong, but it's where I'm at for now.
I will say DFW is a great place to own a restoration company because you get sweltering heat in the summer, you get freezing conditions, you get a little bit of everything.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
my favorite thing about Texas, and I swear, whoever is a major home builder there must have had a background in restoration because they put the hot water tanks in the attics.
It's mandated.
That's
by
a restoration company's dream with those things.
It's mandated by city code in a couple of environments, and it's so great. And it's not just in the attic in a corner.
No, it's in the middle of the house.
Right in the middle. If it fails, we're getting 3 rooms upstairs and 5 rooms downstairs and the kitchen. Right? Awesome. So it's pretty great from that perspective, for sure. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. We're already right here up at about 45 minutes in terms of where we're at in this podcast. And so the last question I really have is, what's the last, like, if somebody could have told you something, you're looking for a new entrepreneur, you're talking to your franchisees that are going to still buy from you, what is that one nugget where you're like, this is the thing to share?
That's a very good question. I have to think about how I'm going to answer that. I would say that one, I mean, again, it's going to sound cliche, but like, don't be afraid, right? Commit and jump. No plan survives contact with the enemy, right? Like, and there's a certain point that if you decide you're going to do it, just commit and do it. You know, maybe it's because I have Nike in my backyard, but like, just do it, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it's true with entrepreneurship. Like, you know, it's never going to be perfect, and there's a certain point that you just got to jump in.
Yeah, the time is never right.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, if you're listening to this podcast and you're considering entrepreneurship, or you've already started and now you're trying to navigate pains and problems, you got to just commit, right? You're already here, or you hate what is going on in your life right now so much that you're wanting to start your own business for whatever reason, then yeah, the reality is commit to this, pull the trigger and go. And then guys like me, guys like you are available for a phone call to help people navigate problems and circumstances.
Absolutely.
I think what they have to realize is you're not going to be on your own. The very reason we have this podcast is because we want to help. You're not on your own. Regardless of what you're doing, get in touch with us. Get in touch with you guys at 911, especially if you're one of your franchisees. Obviously, you've had that experience of going, oh, crap, now what? And people are willing to help, you know? So it's great. I love it. Dan, man, it's been a great conversation, and I really appreciate you being on with me today, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Yeah, likewise. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care. Enjoy the rain, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good one.